Hello, Avila Advantage students. So we quickly approached the end of the course. So I want to say that I've enjoyed working with you all this past 8 weeks. So the final week, you're just going to have two chapters, 32 and 33, to read. You're going to continue with the final My Econ Lab assignment. And as a reminder, I will drop your lowest My Econ Lab grade and replace that with a 25 points at the end of the course. And then you'll wrap up with the final exam that will be out there and available on Monday. So just make sure again that you complete it before the course closes out the Sunday at midnight. And it'll be similar fashion to the last exam that we had, multiple choice, more concept based, but you'll have a certain amount of time listed there to take it. So just make sure you can take it in a place that you're going to be reduce distraction and have access to the internet the entire time. But just wanted to kind of wrap up a few topics for what you're going to go through in the readings this week. And in chapter 32, we've talked about this concept already with production possibility curves, but the idea of comparative advantage and trade. As we've seen from COVID-19, the global economy has really come to a halt. So some of the things that we were used to having in grocery store shelves or at Walmart, they're not there anymore because we pretty much stopped doing all that. Hopefully, I heard there was a good drug that came out this week that they think is going to be pretty promising to help cure individuals. That really shot the stock market up on this past Friday, so that was some encouraging news. But right now it's in clinical trials, but they might be willing to move it to the market a lot faster, and that's going to prevent more deaths and potentially get people back to work faster. So we'll see. A lot of unknowns still in the next coming month. But with this idea of trade, most economists are going to agree that trade is beneficial. By engaging in global trade or global economy, we're going to enjoy more goods and services than we would by keeping our economy closed. That is, we don't trade with anyone. So we would not be able to enjoy the standard of living that we have, the amount of clothing that we have today, the amount of consumer goods you can buy at Walmart without trade. So now there are arguments against trade, and we've seen some of that in the Trump administration, especially the idea of tariffs. That was a battle that he used back and forth quite a bit with China and some other nations, even Canada. Taxes on tariffs are basically a tax on any imported good, so it makes the price higher for the U.S. consumer if we impose taxes. But the government does get to collect money on those tariffs, so it's one way that kind of changes the demand for a particular good or to protect an industry. But at the same time, too, you could have quotas, which just simply says, kind of get to the same point. I limit the amount of goods coming in, but you don't get any tax revenue from it. So you can read a little bit about that. You can read about some of the benefits of trade and the arguments against trade. Arguments against typically deal with the infant industry argument, national security arguments, and job protections. But our economy is pretty much a service economy right now. That's why it's unfortunately really hurting, especially the bars, the restaurants, the gyms, movie theaters, all those other things. But it's we've shifted a lot of that production overseas for the consumer goods. I remember going to Walmart and thinking, I'll look and buy some weights because I'll work out at home. I can't go to the gym. It was all the stuff was gone. All that stuff is probably made in China too. And if we're not shipping there right now, back and forth, Walmart just doesn't have it in stock. So, all right. So you also kind of wrap up the end of that chapter. We'll talk about the World Trade Organization, a lot of agreements that are put in place. There's NAFTA, obviously, the European Union. But a lot of these were put in place to help facilitate trade and to eliminate barriers and to improve the standard of living for many individuals. So, last chapter, what you're going to read about is about FX, or what I call foreign exchange. You're going to understand how, just like any good or service, there is a demand and supply for certain currencies. And currencies that are higher in demand are going to appreciate in value. And there's different reasons why they would. It could be that people want to buy those products that are produced in Europe, or there are investments in a particular region of the world, so they drive up the demand for that currency. So if one currency is appreciating, the other currency, let's say like the European Union and the euro, if the euro is appreciating, it means that an American has to spend more money to buy a euro. So if it currently costs $1.10 to buy a euro now, and let's say 2 months from now it goes up to $1.20, that means that the euro has appreciated in value and the US dollar has depreciated in value. So how does that help us? Well, it helps us in terms of our exports. If now our goods look cheaper to the Europeans, they will be purchasing more of our goods and services. But it also means that if you want to take a trip to Paris, it's going to cost you a lot more. So now there are governments, central banks, sometimes that try to influence the exchange rates. And the reason they do this is for various reasons. One is to promote trade. China is an example, one that will often intervene in markets. They have both a trade surplus and they're able to buy a lot of excess reserves so they can manipulate the currency in their country to keep it depreciated. So that's how they make a lot of their goods very affordable. Now, how you're going to understand this and read about this is they're going to present what's called a balance payments account. It's not like really to me, it's not a balance sheet. It's more of a statement of cash flows. That's the way I want you to think of it. But what you have the current account is the things you think about, like how we export goods and services, how we import goods and services, how money is transferred between individuals. Say someone that is up here from Mexico working in the United States, they transfer money back to Mexico, money's moving back and forth. Now, if you have a trade deficit, that has to be financed somehow. So we have to be getting capital in from somewhere else. So what you'll read about in the textbook is this kind of balance that exists in the sense that if we have a deficit in our trade accounts, someone has to be financing that. So as long as somebody's willing to funnel that money back to us, that is, that if we're buying a lot of goods from China, they're getting, they want to get paid in their own currency, so we have to buy that currency with US dollars. They have US dollars, they're probably going to buy treasury bills, treasury notes, treasury bonds to help us finance those deficits. So it doesn't mean that's right or wrong, it's just, that it has to, in the long run, balance out. And those balance of payments account can influence also exchange rates too. So, but one of the trade-offs we learned about monetary policy of the week, and it's going to talk about in the textbook about fixed exchange rate to a floating exchange rate. Most countries have kind of a floating exchange rate with interventions if they feel a currency is becoming underappreciated or appreciated, or they want to depreciate it. They can intervene in markets as long as they have those reserve currencies. But if you have a fixed exchange rate, say another country has a fixed exchange rate to the dollar, they really don't have much control over monetary policy because they always have to manipulate their money supply to get it and have it fixed to a certain rate. So there's advantages and disadvantages of that. Fixed, you know what it's going to be, but it limits other opportunities for you to maybe engage in monetary policy. So that was pretty much it for this week. So just make sure you wrap up everything for week 7. Get your written assignment in, final my econ lab, your postings, but look forward to working with you online. If you have any questions, we won't have forum discussion this week, but do send me an email via the course if you have questions. But otherwise, I would say that I've enjoyed working with you all, and stay safe, and hopefully we'll get back to somewhat normality this summer. Take care.